Happy Talkers Parent Bootcamp Lesson Pack 2, Behavior and Learning. Behavior happens for a reason, and with our children, it's either attention or avoidance or to get positive reinforcement. Mostly you'll see our kiddos' behaviors focused on getting attention or avoiding something, not as much for positive reinforcement yet, later on. And whatever happens after the behavior takes place is what solidifies it. So basically, if your child gets what they want by their behavior, then they know that that works. So the question is, what is your child doing to achieve their goals? What is their behavior like when they want something? And is that working for them? And the thing that we want to start thinking about throughout this presentation and moving forward is, what are the rewards and what behavior are you rewarding? And what do you want them to do instead? So there are antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, which are the ABCs of behavior. And this is all based upon ABA, or Applied Behavioral Analysis, which is the science of learning, understanding, and changing specific behavior. So if your child's working with a behaviorist, then this is what they're focused on, your child's behaviors and how to, change them, the ones that are undesirable. So there's some different intervention approaches that you've probably heard of. You may have heard of discrete trial, there's pivotal response, there's what we're using, ESDM, incidental teaching, floor time, there's tons. So kiddos that have autism generally are not really interested in pleasing others. It doesn't motivate them as much. They also can't imitate others as easily. Have difficulty using social interaction to learn things, so they have a hard time generalizing from what other kids are doing and then imitating it. So they miss a lot of learning opportunities that cause these developmental delays that you see. So we have to make learning opportunities very explicit for them so that they know without a doubt, this is what I need you to learn, and this is the reinforcement that you get from it. So we are going to start understanding and be able to teach the ABCs of learning, which again are antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. So an antecedent is a behavior that occurs in response to something. So the antecedent is what causes a behavior to happen. And when we're looking at a child's behavior of tantruming, we look at not the tantrum, but what happened right before the tantrum occurred. Maybe they didn't get something they wanted. And so the antecedent would be not getting what they wanted. So we want to start observing it to determine why, and then change that why if possible, or change the response to the why. The behavior itself is lawful. It's functional for the child, so that means it works for them. And for the child, it also results in positive consequences. So what you have to realize is, for a parent, it's maybe not a positive consequence, but it can be a positive consequence for the child. So after they threw the tantrum, they got the toy car. But the parent's not pleased about it, for sure. So what we want to start doing is focusing on what your child does and not what you think they know. And that's something in ESDM that is a little bit different. So when we're completing our checklist, some of the parents will often say, oh, he knows how to do that. But does he do it when you ask him to do it? That's the question. And so behavior is generally very observable and very consistent. So the child will generally respond to the same way across many different environments to an antecedent. And then it's always based upon consequences from past behavior. So if they got what they wanted in the past by doing the certain thing that they are doing, then they're going to do it again because it works. So generally, children do what they do to get something they want or avoid something they don't want. And C for consequence. So behavior is based upon environmental responses, and the environmental responses they receive are generally from their parents and their teachers or anybody else in their lives. So your child learns pretty quickly when you help produce a desired behavior or skill and follow up with a rewarding consequence, because helps them attain their goal. But you help them learn how to do it in a more appropriate way. So if they receive a positive consequence for their behavior, they get what they want, then they'll repeat the behavior or maintain the behavior. But if you ignore the behavior or you don't reinforce the behavior, then the behaviors decrease over time. And that is called extinction of a negative behavior or just of behavior. So how do you do it? Here are the ABCs of learning. Step one, you pay attention to your child's behavior. And you step two, identify the reward or the consequence of the behavior. And then step three, you go back and you identify what came first right before the behavior occurred, which is the antecedent. So first you pay attention to the behavior that they're exhibiting, then you identify what they're getting out of it, and then you determine what happened right before it. And so step four is changing the antecedent, or step five could be changing the consequence. But step six is always being consistent. So in 6 easy steps, you can change unwanted behaviors, but it also takes a ton of patience and consistency. So unwanted behaviors become a habit if they repeatedly lead to goal achievement. So these behaviors such as tantrums or aggression, if they end up getting the child either out of something they don't want to do or getting them something they want, then they're going to continue. So here's a good example. So first of all, you identify the behavior you want to change. So the behavior in this case will be a child is screaming when she wants to get milk. When she wants milk, she screams. Then you think about what they could do instead, easily and efficiently, to achieve that same goal. So that think about, like, can I have them point to it? Can I have them say milk? Can I, something that's really easy for them to do. And then when the antecedent happens, so the antecedent in this case is that the little girl sees her sister get some milk. And so as soon as she sees her sister get milk, she screams, ah! And so then, of course, she gets milk to stop, so that everybody stops the screaming. So for the antecedent here, she sees her sister get milk. And so what we want to do is replace the screaming by with pointing. So we want to, for this, she'll grab the milk out of her sister's hand maybe, or out of your hand. So we want to get her pointing instead. And so your child's goal for this one is she gets the milk if she screams. So we want to change the consequence or reward for using the replacement behavior, and she still gets the milk. And with this, it's really it's very important that you pick one thing to work on at a time. So if the one thing that you're picking to work on is cleaning up toys, all right? So you say to your child, okay, it's time to clean up. And they immediately either run from the room, throw a tantrum, start dumping the toys out, something like that. You think about the antecedent. So you say, okay, when I say it's time to clean up, they dump the toys out and start getting upset. So, and then what happens is they avoid the behavior because you clean up the toys for them. So they actually got a positive reinforcement for that, right? So what you want to do is you let them know we're going to clean up, and they start screaming. And instead of avoiding the screaming this time, you say, okay, when you calm your body down, we are going to clean up. And so you don't move from that room until your child calms down. You don't move to the next activity. You don't let them take out a new toy. You don't let them get past you from the door. And they may just have an absolute tantrum. And you just have to be willing to breathe through it and wait it out. The other thing is it could be something that's not as dramatic as a tantrum initially, so maybe you can shape it. So you see all the toys on the floor and you scoop up like 10 of them and put them in a bin and then leave 2 out and say, you have to pick up these 2 toys and then we can go play. And, of course, they're not going to want to do that. So you have to bring them over and hand over hand pick them up and put them in the bin. Pick them up and put them in the bin and then be, okay, we're all done. And so 2 of the toys getting put away and then them getting a positive reinforcement starts a new pattern of behavior. But the important thing is that you have to do it every time. So if you don't care if they clean up the room or you don't have time for the battle, then don't even ask them because you don't want to set down a confusing request for them. So either they're going to clean it up or you're going to ask them to clean it up. They have to clean it up. Or if you don't have time to battle through it with them, then don't ask them to clean it up. I hope that makes sense. So the reason you want to pick one behavior to replace at a time is because if you're working on 2, your child's going to be, it's just going to be too hard for you to keep up on. So pick the one thing that you think would make the biggest impact, which may be cleaning up their toys or at bedtime they have to, stay and lay down in bed or something like that. So whatever it is, but don't pick 2 at the same time because it'll be too hard. You want to pick something that's a little bit easier first, that you think you can achieve, and so that you start kind of more of a snowball effect of like, oh, I'm giving positive reinforcement here. So we're going to talk about it more, but read page 215 for a more specific description. So here's the exercise. Let's identify the behavior you want your child to change and then think about what's the goal. Well, maybe for the cleanup goal, it's avoidance. They don't want to. They don't want to clean up. They don't want to do the work. Think about what they could do easily and efficiently to achieve their goal. For this one, they want to go outside and play or they want to move on to the next activity. So the easiest thing they can do is put two pieces of a puzzle in a bin or two blocks in a bin. So you want to make it easy for them at first and then increase the challenge later on. And so then what's the antecedent? So if the antecedent is you tell them, okay, it's time to clean up, and then the replacement behavior would be that they would you would put a bulk of the blocks away, and then your child would put maybe just 2 at the end away. And so the consequence or reward for using this replacement behavior is they get to move on and do the next thing, and they get praise from you. Great job cleaning up. Thank you for your help. And then you move on. So with all behaviors, the consistency is key. And so when the demand is placed, you have to be willing to follow through with the demand because as soon as you don't, they will go backward and think that they can pay attention sometimes and don't have to pay attention at other times. So the expectation has to be consistent, and the follow through has to be consistent. So make sure that you're only asking them to do what you have time to follow through with, or else you're going to start back at the beginning again with the routine of, okay, we're going to clean up and they're going to have their tantrum and you have to wait it out. And so you want to be consistent and when you do place the demand, require them to follow through. Plan ahead. So for this one and for many things with our kiddos, when you know them better than anyone else knows them. So they're going to have a hard time transitioning, and you may know that they're going to have a hard time cleaning up or requesting something. So first of all, plan ahead with, do I have time to deal with this right now? Maybe, maybe not. Um, but also having things in place. So if it's a cleanup task, then you have bins for your child to put the things into. If it's they're going to have to make a choice between, going, like, so if you're at the park and you need to get going home, you want to think ahead, like, how long does it generally take my child to transition out of the park? And maybe 15 minutes. So 5 minutes ahead of, 15 minutes, you say, we're going to have to leave in 15 minutes, and you start giving them warnings ahead of time. So there's different ways of thinking about it, but you have to you have to plan ahead for these different behavior challenges to occur so that you give yourself enough time to work it through with your child. So when your child is behaving in a way that's challenging, it's super duper easy to get frustrated, because it just is. It's human nature. So you have to try to bring yourself to put on a positive affect, which doesn't mean a smile. It just means like a game face. So you kind of put on a mask in a way where you just have this calm face. You take deep breaths and you just breathe through the frustration so that your child doesn't see it. What's great about kids is that they're very intuitive, but what's tricky about kids is that they're very intuitive. So if they see you looking frustrated, they may amp up their game to get you to the point where you'll just give up. Um, so you have to stay calm and recognize their feelings. I know you're upset. I know you're frustrated, but we have to clean up before we go. I know you don't want to leave. I understand. I understand you're mad, but we still have to X, Y, and Z. I know you want the juice, but you have to stop screaming or else you won't get the juice. And so the more calm you can be in the face of this adversity or frustration, the better the consequences are for your child, because they'll realize that they're not going to be able to affect you. Even though inside it might be making you crazy, you have to pretend that it doesn't and not show any of the emotions. You just kind of have to stand and wait it out. And it does get better. The time of tantrums decreases. There may be one that comes up called an extinction burst, where your child gets so stinking frustrated they have the worst tantrum of their life, and then they realize, because this has happened to them like 8 times already, and your mom has made me do this, and then I'm so sick of it, and I'm just going to try this one last ditch effort and make it as terrible for as possible. And then they'll stop. So that's why it's called an extinction burst, because it's the worst behavior you've ever seen, and then it stops because they realize that you're not going to give in. And so it's hard, but stick to it. Reward attempts rather than performance. So when your child is working on a skill, whether it's cleaning up or putting the dishes away or whatever, that you want to make sure that you're praising them along the way and letting them know that you like how hard they're working on things. You like how they're I like how you're putting your blocks in the bin. I like how you're coloring. So rather than waiting for the finished product, reward them with your words for the effort that they're putting forward, because it keeps them going and keeps them motivated. Use reinforcers whenever possible. So if you know that your child hates to clean up but loves bubbles, you're going to say, after we clean up, we'll do some bubbles. Or after we clean up, you can have your goldfish crackers, you can have your snack. So always be talking about, if you clean up, then you get this. If we do that, then we get to go to the store. If you do this, then we can go outside and play. So as much as you can, use those reinforcers to motivate them to complete their task. alternate hard tasks with easy tasks when you're doing things with your child. So you never want to give your kiddo something really hard to do and then move them into something that's really hard to do. You need to work them through something hard and then do something really easy for them so that they experience success. That will keep their attention span with you longer too. Something new and then something old that they've already succeeded with. And then ideally, if you could use this during your focus time. So, do you have something that you know is hard for them, like stringing beads? Then finish. Then do the next thing as a sensory social activity or something that you've done with them before that they were really really great at, like the ball tower or matching. So, ending the session or ending the time with them in a positive way where they're successful will encourage them to want to come back and do more. Model desired behaviors. This is the hardest one. So if you're sarcastic in just your nature, or if you get frustrated easily, then chances are your child will too. They get it from somewhere, and so often we have to check our own selves and how we're talking to our children, and the eye rolls and the heavy sighs and things when they're doing something wrong, or when they're doing something frustrating. They pick up on that and use that in other ways. So, if you are, say, at the grocery store and the cashier is rude to you, you almost have an obligation to be kind back to them to show your child how to behave. Or if your child snatches something from you when you're playing together, you can say, "Oh, can I have that toy?" And then when they give to you, you could say, "Oh, I like how you listened to me and you gave me that toy." That would just talking it through with them and telling them what you like about it, and then modeling like a good cleanup. Like if you're all done with something and you say, "Oh, I'm going to clean and put my stuff away," and just be thinking that they're little mirrors at this point. So anything that they see you do, they will do. So keeping that in mind when you're going through either a frustrating time or even frustrated with them, so that you're modeling the right thing that you want them to be doing. Pick your battles. And we've talked about this a bit, but if you are exhausted at the end of the day, you're not going to jump into focus time with your kiddo where you're asking them to do a bunch of things, because no doubt you're going to get frustrated. Or if they're really tired, hungry, frustrated, you're not going to choose that time to have them clean their room. So, pick your battles. If it's not something that is going to hurt them or hurt anyone else, then you may just want to not pay as much attention to it. So, an example in the classroom for us is, if we have circle time and one of the kids is swinging their feet around, generally it's to get attention. So we just don't pay attention to that, and then we praise the child next to them and say, "Oh, I like how Johnny's sitting in his chair." And so that Jo- if Jill wants attention and that's why she's swinging her feet, but Johnny gets attention for sitting quietly, then she's going to try to sit quietly. Give closed choices. So if your child is having a hard time with control and they want to be in control of all the situations that happen or in control of what's going on, you kind of need to just give them a choice of two things. So you can have chicken for dinner or soup. Which one do you want? And those are the only two choices. We can play blocks or we can play cars, but those are the only two options. Sorry about that, and just letting them know straight up. Don't get involved in any drama or negotiation. It's called negotiating with a terrorist. So you have to just tell them what are the two options. We can go to the park or we can go to the store, but we can't go to the zoo today. And then that's it. No negotiating. Give attention for the right things. So, making sure that you're focusing on not children love attention. They'll take it for either the negative or the positive, just as long as they get your attention. And so, you want to make sure that you're giving attention for the things that they're doing that make you happy and not getting mad at them because even negative attention is attention. So to ignore behaviors that you don't like helps them to go away, and to attend and pay attention to behaviors that you do like keep sustains them and keeps them going for longer. Hopefully some of that was helpful, and we'll individualize it more for each of your children because each of them, I'm sure, have their own behavior patterns develop. So we have to work through them individually, but that kind of gives you an idea of how it all works, the ABCs. Chapter 9, it goes over it in more detail. Learning and behavior, it's called, and they have some great examples. Remember to use your top tips when you're working with your child. And for this week, observe your child's behavior and your response to that behavior and see what kind of response you're giving. Is it something that is positive for the child or and causing the behavior to continue or not? And if it is positive for your child, then we have to change it up. When your child meets a goal, just email me for the next goal. And remember, connect and have fun so your child learns more quickly.